specifically of Luzon, his former home, with himself playing an almost predestined messianic role. Lieutenant Colonel Weldon "Dusty" Rhodes, his personal pilot and a close intimate, once opined of his chief that he had some feeling that he was a man of destiny. He seemed to believe that he was especially protected so that he could fulfill a mission. MacArthur loved the people of the Philippines with almost familial intensity. In his mind, the impending invasion of Luzon equated to something of a 20th century crusade. Only a few weeks shy of his 65th birthday, MacArthur remained physically robust, though he now combed strands of black hair over his balding pate in an apparent effort to conceal the encroachment of senior citizenship. He seldom allowed photographs of himself bareheaded, preferring instead to wear a specially designed braided cap most everywhere he went. Upscale sunglasses and a corncob pipe completed a look that seemingly only he could pull off. Hunched over the desk inside his cabin aboard Boise, MacArthur scrawled his letter to Jean on personal stationery. "The Boise is the most comfortable cruiser on which I have traveled. The suite I occupy is much larger, has artificial ventilation, and better cooking than the others." Battle-hardened Boise's modernity reflected the stupendous and growing power of the U.S. Navy by 1945. By the same token, MacArthur and his Southwest Pacific Area SWPA command could be said to symbolize the corresponding maturation of the U.S. Army during the war with Japan. He had once led a poorly equipped, sparsely fed colonial-style army in the Philippines, but now presided over the largest ground force ever assembled for amphibious island warfare, and these legions were only one component of a larger army that had now grown to full maturity. Indeed, nearly 1.4 million soldiers were now serving throughout the Pacific and Asia. By war's end, the number would swell to 1.8 million, the third largest ground force ever sent overseas by the United States to fight a war. Superbly equipped, highly mechanized, well-fed and well-led, the Army of the Pacific Asia Theater reflected the bounty of the nation that produced it, and it was shouldering the onerous responsibility of expeditionary-style warfare in far-flung, inhospitable locales. Army soldiers were doing the lion's share of the fighting and dying in the Pacific, particularly in the Philippines, the true nexus of the American war against Japan. And yet, contemporary and subsequent popular memory tended to focus on the more publicity-savvy and extraordinarily valorous Marines, who had carved out a distinguished combat record, but were far fewer in number than the soldiers. Even now, in 1945's infancy, the Army labored in an almost unbelievable diversity of missions, combat and non-combat, that included ostensibly everything from the logistics of loading and shipping to guerrilla warfare, from diplomacy to cutting-edge medical care, and from civil affairs to engineering of such sophistication as to lay foundations of knowledge to benefit future generations. Spread over nearly one-third of the globe's surface of island, sea, and continent, it was an army of such size and diversity of purpose as to make one unified command nearly impossible. MacArthur controlled only about 60% of Army combat formations. Over 3 years, the Army had steadily fought its way northward from the South Pacific to the Central Pacific and now beyond. The Army's evolution into an extraordinarily potent, modern military force paralleled the maturation of the U.S. Navy into the most powerful maritime force in global history, a behemoth of sea power upon which rested the foundation of the American war against Japan. The Army Air Forces, particularly the B-29 formations that were beginning to bomb Japan itself, only added to this prodigious combination of American military strength that, in tandem with America's theater allies, now amounted to a dagger at the Japanese throat. Allied victory now seemed certain, and yet the tasks ahead, especially for the U.S. Army, were daunting in the extreme. The impending liberation of the Philippines, the opening of a viable landward supply route to China, and the seizure of key islands on the doorstep of Japan all loomed as costly enterprises on the immediate drawing board. And somewhere beyond, like an Everest on the horizon, a horrendously bloody invasion of Japan beckoned as a serious possibility, perhaps even a necessity. So the essential question now was how much it would cost the Allies, and most notably the Army, in lives, treasure, and time, to subdue Japan, a country still tightly controlled by a